Here at 105.5 WDHA on All Mixed Up, my guests this morning are Ira Robbins and Dave Schulps. We're talking about Zip It Up, the best of Trouser Press Magazine from 1974 to 1984. Ira's holding up a copy right now. Ira, let me start with you and let's go to the end in 1984. MTV comes on. Video is supposed to kill the radio star.
It killed the Prince star too.
Yeah, you decided to take Trouser Press down, at least in part because of MTV. Why?
What we could do for the bands that we wanted to write about was write about them. What MTV could do was play the music, show show them their videos, and then interview them in person on TV. So we started to feel like what we could do wasn't as special as it had been. For a long time, we were kind of like a lifeline for people because we could write about bands that they couldn't find out about any other way. And we sort of felt like our turf had been sort of extracted out from under us.
Radio felt it to an extent as well, but I don't know. People keep saying radio is going to die sooner or later, and they've been saying that since pretty much the medium started, and it hasn't happened yet. I was always surprised that when I read that was one of the reasons why you decided to cease publication.
Yeah, no ill will towards MTV. I mean, what they did was great. They made a lot of bands very successful in America, but I mean, MTV in a way functioned as a national radio station. They had a playlist that went to every city in America after a while. And so, the same way the BBC functions in Britain, where, a record that got added to BBC Two became a hit because it got played all over Britain, at the same time. That was something that we couldn't compete with. And so, it was fine. I mean, there were other reasons why we stopped. Age, money, fatigue, boredom, all those things, and the music was getting away from us a little bit as well. I mean, Duran Duran was great, but they weren't the Clash.
Dave, let me ask you a question, and let's go back to the beginning here in 1974. You,
Sure.
Ira, and Karen Rose decide, hey, let's put together a magazine. 3 years later, you are on a private jet sitting next to Robert Plant. How surreal was that?
Very surreal. Yeah, and the weird thing is that we were actually supposed to interview Jimmy Page that day. It didn't happen because he was quote unquote under the weather. As I watched him being kind of carried up the airplane steps by two guys carrying, he had his arms around two large guys to get up that ramp. I knew it might not actually happen on the plane, and it didn't. And it took 5 days in LA to actually get that interview done. But when it got done, it was great. I mean, he gave me 5 hours. And we just sat there and went through his career in various stages. And it was a pleasure. It was really wonderful.
One of the things that struck me about Trouser Press was it started, a few years obviously after Rolling Stone. As Rolling Stone magazine grew and obviously was very, very successful, it had a lot of detractors. And a lot of those detractors, I think, were people who didn't realize that they were out of the demo that Rolling Stone was going after. I never noticed that reaction to Trouser Press readers, Ira.
Well, I mean, we didn't really have a demographic in the traditional sense because, we wrote about a pretty wide variety of artists. And I mean, the one thing that you had to be a Trouser Press reader was like really into music. I mean, to be a Rolling Stone reader, you could be into the culture. You might want to, read about Saturday Night Live, but Trouser Press, we really did nothing but write about bands, and occasionally towards the end, we started writing about, synthesizers because we figured out we might get a few ads that way, which we did. But I mean, the commitment that we showed in the magazine was what we expected from our readers. And I mean, one of the things that we always did, which I think set us apart a little bit, was that we never talked down to people. I mean, when USA Today started, there was this idea that they had to be pitched at like a 6th grade reading level or something like that. We never cared about that. We used a lot of big words. We made references to things that people wouldn't know about. And we just sort of expected, because we'd grown up this way, if you didn't know it, you looked it up, and like, we thought that like leading people was much better than pandering to them. And so, we wrote about bands that they had never heard of. We wrote about, places that they'd never been to. You know, it was just our way of respecting our own integrity and our own curiosity and letting people follow us if they wanted to. But yeah, there was never really a demographic. I mean, I think we had, as we went into the MTV era, we got much younger readers, which was a weird thing for us. I mean, all of a sudden, our readers weren't as sophisticated, and there were a lot of kids buying the magazine on newsstands because Adam Ant was on the cover. And that was weird for us because we were getting older and they were getting younger.
You know, I think when I think of Trouser Press, a comparison I think of is the bands Velvet Underground and Big Star. And this is going back now to the earlier days of Trouser Press. Velvet Underground and Big Star were two bands that did not sell a lot of records, but it was said that everybody who bought one of those albums went out and started a band. And I think about some of the writers and some of the musicians who were part of that early days of Trouser Press. The readers, they either went out and became writers for you or, you know, rock writers in general. I think of Bill Flanagan, whose work I love, David Frick, Holly Gleason wrote for you. And then bands like the Dictators, Yola Tango, the DBs who were part of that Bowery Electric show, Dennis Dykin, you know, all of these guys. It's almost as if you spawned this whole genre of writers and bands.
Yeah, Dennis made our first T-shirts when he was 15 years old in his garage, pre-Smithereens, obviously.
We also had really good interns. It was kind of amazing the success that our interns went on to. I mean, yeah, it's funny because, you know, people have asked me whether we were really tremendously talented at picking writers, and I don't think we were. I just think that people found us, and if we liked them, they wrote for us. And, you know, there was no money really involved. I mean, we paid people terribly. So it had to be, you had to really be into it, but somehow those people had the talent and the commitment to go on to real careers. So, you know, you look back at the pages of Trouser Press and you see a lot of well-known names, you know, who did a lot of great work for next to peanuts, you know, and the photographers as well. We had really great photographers.
You talk about commitment, what have you. And the other part for me, Ira, was that they were fans of the music. And the first writer who came to mind to me as a kid was Richard Robinson when he was editing Hit Parader magazine. You know, I'd read that and I'm just learning to play the guitar, and I'd been playing drums for a few years. And I thought, wow, this guy reminds me of me. He cares about this music. And that was the thing that always got me about whoever it was I was reading in Trouser Press. There was a passion for it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we were able to do sort of unintentionally was develop a character. The magazine had a character, it had a personality of its own. You know, it wasn't just kind of a neutral tabloid that anything could be done in. I mean, people still to this day talk about a Trouser Press band, and they don't mean anybody that we wrote about. I mean, like, you could hear a band that formed 3 weeks ago and like, oh yeah, they're a Trouser Press band. You know, and I find it fascinating that people have been able to internalize whatever it was that we thought was important in good music, and they still can feel that, you know, when they look at music and listen to music.
The book, by the way, Zip It Up, The Best of Trouser Press Magazine, 1974 to 1984, available through Trouser Press Books. In fact, we've had a couple of other authors on All Mixed Up recently. Harold Bronson, Time Has Come Today, and Jim Sullivan with his Backstage and Beyond books, which are both wonderful. And details, of course, at trouserpress.com. Ira Robbins, Dave Schulps, best of luck with the book, and thank you so much for your time. It was great speaking with both of you here this morning on DHA.
Thanks for your time, too.
Jim, keep up the great work. You're a hero of ours.
Thank you.